Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to The Caring Economy with me, Toby Usnik. Today, my guest is Alan Patricof. He is first and foremost a friend because his son and daughter-in-law and their kids are dear friends of ours. But also, he is a great inspiration to me. Alan Patricof is an American investor. He is one of the earliest pioneers of venture capital in private equity industries. He founded Apax Partners in the 1960s while trying to get to Woodstock, which we'll talk about later. And then he started Greycroft later, and at age 85 rather, just a couple of years ago, he started his third venture firm, Primetime Partners, which we're going to focus on today. That is an organization that focuses on investing in products, services, technologies, and even media for the quote unquote ageless generation, for those over 50. He has been involved in such investments as AOL, Office Depot, New York Magazine, and more. He's also an active philanthropist, an investor. He gets involved in political races, and he's also a supporter of cultural productions and an all-around bon vivant. So with that, I say welcome to The Caring Economy, Alan Patricof.
Thanks for inviting me, Toby. It's looking forward to the conversation.
And I failed to mention, we're also going to talk about your new book, No Red Lights, which speaks to me in so many ways about living life to its fullest. But Alan, we'll take about 30 minutes. If you could just give our listeners a 2-minute synopsis, I know it's hard to do with your accomplished life, of your life. Where did you grow up? How were you raised? Where did you study? How did you get where you got?
87 years in 2 minutes. I'll give you it in as they do in audible terms at 2 times. I grew up in New York. I went to school in New York. My parents were immigrants. My father came from just outside of Kiev, and my mother came from a town in Belarus. They came over here as a result of the pogroms at that time in 1907 and 1913. So my father settled in Ohio. My mother settled in Connecticut. And they were poor but not starving. I mean, they didn't have an easy life growing up, and I think I probably was influenced a lot as I grew up to be parsimonious, be careful about how I spent and lived life. I never was in a taxi till after I graduated from college. I never flew in a plane till after then, and they were around. And we did have a television relatively early on in the early 50s. But I went to Ohio State as a college, not because I chose it, because I got there by default. But it ended up being a reasonably good experience. From there, I went hunting for a job. And in those days, they weren't headhunters out, and they weren't recruiters out at Ohio State for sure. And I wanted to go to Wall Street. So what I did is I walked the streets, literally walking from building to building, taking an elevator up to the top floor, walking down the stairs. And I started at 110 Wall Street because I knew I wanted to be in finance. And I ended up getting a job at 63 Wall Street. So you can figure I went through a certain number of buildings to get there. I was very fortunate that I got a great first job by accident. I never should have gotten it because I was recruited by a Yaley, and there's 2 partners were very prominent people who had been at Goldman Sachs, and I think by accident they took me because I was, a hayseed in effect from Ohio State, not what you would normally get, what you would hire.
I'm from Ohio, my friend.
Yeah. Today they'd be hiring Harvard Business School graduates, but I got in. While I was there, I doubled up and got an MBA from Columbia, and in my first job, and I went on to have a second, third, and fourth job, all moving up, and I was actually recruited in all 4 of those jobs, and at the time I started my own business, which was at the December 69, January 70, I had noticed that a lot of private family groups they primarily invested in public stock, just like I had worked for a family group, not my family. And what happened whenever it was a private investment, they kind of shoved it in a drawer, and they did it out of default because someone they knew pushed them into it, not because they really wanted to invest. They didn't do any analysis. And I was the only one in this organization that liked the idea of private companies, because you really could get close to the company instead of just buying something on the stock market where you buy and sell. Once you invest in a private company, you become a partner. So I started a firm to service high net worth families and individuals. And I had 9 clients. The 10th client was a fund that I formed of $2.5 million. And jump forward, I brought in and went to Europe in 1976 and added an operation in London and France and Paris. And then a couple of years later, I added one in Germany, Switzerland, and Spain, and take it through to where I left it in 2002, 3, around that period of time. It went from 2.5 million under management to 75. Well, that's not true. 30 billion. Today it's $75 billion under management. And I changed the name from Alan Patricof Associates to Apax. Alan Patricof Associates. The X was for international or cross-border, however you want to portray it. And it was a very exciting journey. But what happened is that as we got bigger and bigger and bigger, we slowly started leaving the venture capital world, because with that much money under management, you can't really make $250,000 or $500,000 investments. You have to really think in terms of 10, 20, $50 million investments. And so I took a few years off to help the World Bank and the IFC and some charities in developing entrepreneurial projects around the world, and primarily Africa, but also South America, China, India, which was a very exciting time of 3 or 4 years that I was doing that. During that time, I was fortunate enough to be a Democratic nominee to the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is a very interesting foreign aid organization of the U.S. government. I got reappointed there. And in 2006, I decided I'm going to go back in the venture business, and I decided to start Greycroft, and I set it up so it could only be a venture capital firm, because I had been through that. And I set up with certain principles that I had learned from my experience in running and building Apax, that there were a way to run the business I thought that was more conducive to the kind of companies and the kind of investments we were going to make. And I built it from, in that case, we started with $75 million fund, a little later than 1970. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I decided that Greycroft was starting to get so big that we were kind of losing that personality. And we went from 20 or 30 people to 65 people, and all the administrative overhead and support group. And because of our success, and it's done fabulous. And they started becoming more of a growth equity firm, putting in larger size investments. And so I decided that maybe I'd do something new. And I've been intrigued for the last 4 or 5 years by the fact that there are so many of us that are getting along in age, but are full of energy and have a long life ahead of us, just like you and myself. And I still am very active physically and mentally, and so I started looking into that. I also found out that the fastest growing part of the population is people over the age of 60. There'll be more people over 60 in 2030 than will be under 18. And I got together with a woman partner who was also fascinated with the same subject, and we decided to start a firm, and we started Primetime Partners, which we started with $50 million in this case, because it's a new concept. There's no one else really around investing primarily in this area. And we've been in business 2 years. We've made 25 investments, and we set ourselves out to become thought leaders in the ageless generation. And so I don't know if it was 2 minutes or 5 minutes, but that's the story of my life. It's as short as I know how to tell it.
No red lights, my friend. So a couple of follow-ups on that. A quick one is, are you open to other investors? If someone wanted to get in on that opportunity, is that something that you're closed? Or are you welcoming? And if so, if you're opening, how do you find you?
At the moment, we are closed. You have my email is alan@timepartners.com. We will probably be starting a new fund next year. I'd be shocked if it goes over 100 million. We're going to try to keep it between 50 and 100 because we really don't want to get caught up with having it. And plus the fact that in this particular area there aren't a lot of mature companies around where you want to put in large sums. They're mostly what we're finding out, a lot of young
Innovators.
companies, innovating, and most everybody we back, not everybody, gets into it because they've had a brother, a father, a mother, an uncle, a husband who has had some problem, and they've come to realize the problems and the needs of older people, and it says, they start a business. So there's been a lot of startup activity at early stage investments as opposed to mature investments.
Yep. So that makes perfect sense. So we'll keep you in mind there. Two follow-up questions. One relates to your education, the other to your parents. I'm in the 5th chapter of your book, which I'm very much enjoying. It's a lovely read. But you talk early on about your mother's influence over you, and one sort of mantra that she taught you in trying to digest the newsreels and the more complex issues of the day, the war and stuff, was, is it good for the Jewish people or is it not good for the Jewish people? And you say in your book, you use that to say sometimes for levity, but also just practically speaking. I love that. I also loved my mom, and she spoke common sense, things like that too. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, Toby, was my grandmother. My mother was born. She came over so young that she spoke English. My grandmother spoke Yiddish and Russian. I guess she spoke German, and she really struggled with the language. And I remember taking, as I say in the book, I'd take her to the movies on Saturday. We had to sit through double features twice, but it was during the war, and so you would confuse her with everything that went on. She didn't quite get it all, and you'd tell her about the headlines and what the so and so crossing the Rhine, patent, whatever. And so she would say, all I want to know is it good for the Jews or bad for the Jews? Because people who came from Europe like that, that was the context, because they lived a life that everything was bad for the Jews. So it helped to explain to her. So what you're referring to is, I use it for humor, but I have to tell you, it resonates. I just used it the other day when I was at a meeting that's dealing with ratings and reviews for purchasing officers. And they went through the most complicated explanation about what was happening and who they were selling to and what they were going to buy and what the price. And I said, all I want to know is it good for the Jews or bad for the Jews? And it's kind of a shortcut saying, just give me the straight answer. Should I be happy or concerned? And it's when I don't understand something, I use that. And
I love it.
I hope if you like it, you're entitled to use it.
Yeah, it allows people to have a little humor and go along with it and understand.
You can translate, make it, is it good for the Protestants or bad for the Protestants? Has nothing to do with religion.
Good for democracy or not? We'll come
back. Has nothing to do with religion. Except Jews, are persecuted. So
historically, yes.
So they think they're persecuted.
Now, the other question, as I said, I'm born in Ohio, not raised there, but I'm a Buckeye, proud Buckeye. I want to ask you to compare and contrast your experience at this great land-grant university in the Midwest with your Ivy League business school experience. I know you're a trustee at the Columbia Business School, and your wonderful granddaughter Nina is about to start there. There are pros and cons wherever you are, right? But do you have any sort of 30,000-foot perspectives on comparing and contrasting those two types of institutions?
Yeah, well, I don't want to overdo it. But they are different. I mean, going to a Big Ten school is an experience, and it was one of the things that I enjoyed about it. It was so different than New York. I went to prep school called Horace Mann, and we wore ties and jackets every day to school. And I can assure you, and that habit stuck with me. So when I went to Ohio, I'd wear a tie and jacket. So it stood out a little bit, not that much, but Friday night bonfires, marching bands. I'd say there's a much more casual educational style in terms of everything academically. I mean, it is a state school, and it has, I don't know what it is today, 80 or 1,000 or 80,000 or 100,000 people. It's got to be different. I mean, Columbia, I only can talk in the context of the business school. It's a very disciplined environment, and academically stressful, or you really have to be concerned and put the time in. And I guess for someone lived from Ohio coming to New York, they have that New York experience, which is totally different than Columbus.
Yeah.
I like Columbus. I like living and having that informality, and I like everything I just described about it. But for me, it was a diet that I went through Ohio State in 3 years. 3 years was enough, but I don't regret it. And as I say to everybody, when they're all uptight about what college they're going to go to, it really, after the first 4, 5, 6 years, it becomes much less important. Early on. But it's interesting, Toby. I tell this story every time I go to a dinner party or I'm with a group of people, and you sit around. And where did you go to school, Toby?
Well, I actually went to Columbia for graduate school and Penn, and a small college in Virginia. Nothing in the Midwest.
No. Which one in Virginia?
Hampton City College. It's a small.
Okay. All right. No, it fits my point. You go around at the table and they say, I went to Columbia, I went to Harvard, I went to Antioch, I went to Hampton Sydney, I went to Wisconsin, I went to Ohio State. Every time the same thing happens. How come you went to Ohio State? They won't say about any other school in the world, except no matter where I go, it's so anathema to New York. It's New York. I mean, I'm sure they certainly wouldn't say that in Ohio, but you could go to Michigan, Wisconsin, Northwestern. They have no response. Ohio State gets a response.
Yeah, I will say of the Midwesterners, they are just genuinely nice people, I think. I don't think it's the most descriptive adjective, but I do think Midwesterners are nice. I, like you, sort of prefer the metabolism of New York. But anyway, I want to shift to another topic, which is you have been involved in many things, including politics throughout your career. You have a fantastic endorsement from Bill and Hillary Clinton in your book, No Red Lights. As someone who's also helped on their campaigns and stuff, I just wonder, what do you say to listeners about the role of citizens in democratic politics, and what have you learned?
We have a bifurcated audience here. I mean, we're going to talk about Democrats versus Republicans. It's up to you, but I just admire you and your children, that your sons too, that I know are very actively involved in putting their energy and their money and their words around candidates. And I think that's part of the democratic process. Yeah, I would say
the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
I'd say the family are Democrats. This is a Democrat family, but I would say I want to answer you a little bit more broadly.
Sure.
What No Red Lights, my book, is somewhat about, is about living an eclectic life and living it fully. That's the message. And it has resonated with older people to say, there's another chapter in your life still ahead. If I could start a business at 72 and then another one at 85, if you're retiring at 60, forget about Florida and fishing and golf, and think about how you could do something either similar to what you did before or something brand new. And if you're younger, I say to people, I say it in the book, it doesn't say it, but it comes out, live an eclectic life. Don't get stuck behind your desk and just be a venture capitalist or an investment banker or a lawyer or a doctor. Taste other things: taste theater, taste books, taste music, taste politics, taste international living, and that's where politics came in. I try, Toby, I'm going to Burning Man in a few. I'm going. People will ask me why I'm going. I'm going because it's there. Why do people climb Mount McKinley? I mean, I'm curious to see what it's like. And after that, I'm going to do the New York City Marathon. I'm going to jog. I ran it 5 times when I was much younger. I cannot run it anymore. But why am I doing it? Because I want to see if I can do it.
Yeah.
And so for younger people, I've gotten a lot of responses back from older people who then tell me how it also was great for their kids, not their young kids, but kids who are forming their careers, and telling them, before you get stuck in a hole, and politics fits into that. Get yourself involved. Get yourself involved locally.
Yeah.
Get yourself involved federally. Get involved with civic organizations, philanthropy. Try, start collecting art. Start, make your life interesting. And I've led a very interesting life, which is why I wrote the book.
Yeah. Well, I actually think you and all of your family members who I know, there's a common denominator of service. And I don't mean in an arrogant or elitist way, but just you certainly love and take care of each other, but you also aspire and help at a higher level your communities. And I think that concept of service, whether you're getting involved in political races or philanthropic activities, we'll talk a little bit about your cultural stuff. I'm with you. I think it leads to a much fuller life. And it also is much more fun. Having been to Burning Man 3 times, I'm happy to make any suggestions. I think it's
send me one of your old costumes.
I will. I've got some good ones. I've got my Lily Pulitzer skirt. I don't know if that's one for you, but you won't regret it. I promise you. Alan, so let's talk a little bit about your venture capital. You have done this so well through the years. You've had your failures too, and you talk a little bit about it in the book, but do you have any sort of lessons that you've divined, or sort of a mantra that runs through your mind when you're assessing a possible investment opportunity? There's some things that just say to you right away, ooh, walk away or mind the gap, or do you kind of wait and see?
Sure, I think venture capital to a great extent is a learning apprentice business, and it's recognizing patterns that get repeated again. So you do hopefully get a little better through avoiding some of the pitfalls as you go forward. And I have had losers. When I wrote this book, I deliberately, because there have been lots of other books written by people similar to me, I did not want to write this book about all the successes I've had. I deliberately wanted to include things that didn't work, or mistakes I made, which you correctly pointed out. I made the mistake of not investing in Starbucks because I was so parochial. And living in New York, there were, at that time in the 1980s, there were 2 or 3 Greek luncheonettes on every block. And I couldn't possibly understand how you could need another coffee shop in New York. And I didn't understand that if I had seen it, perhaps, which I didn't do, I learned to go and kick the tires, and not based on just my personal local experience, but that it was a different lifestyle that they were creating, that was not about sitting at a stool at a luncheon counter and having your chock full of nuts, coffee, and date nut bread. It was sitting around all day and working on your computer and socializing and a lot of other things. So, but I've learned to back people. Hopefully, have done it before. Back people who have passion about what they're doing, not just doing it because someone else made a lot of money and they think they can do it. Also, to try to come up with ideas that have some kind of protective barriers around it. It's a firewall or whatever that doesn't make them vulnerable to being put out of business the next week with a competitor. Someone who can mobilize a team, who they know how to inspire, who perhaps they've worked with before, which I think has a certain value to it. certain people who understand the economics of the business. You'll find a lot of people who start businesses today, and for a long time, don't really look at how do you make money in this business, and without having to go back to the well multiple times and keep diluting yourself and your investors, and think there's an open spigot, but rather try to contain it, reduce their dilution, and try to build a company without a heavy dilution and without multiple rounds of financing. So I think that we still make mistakes all the time, but hopefully we can see where someone has that certain kind of charisma or magic, that and an experience factor.
Yeah, a little bit of a gut factor, I imagine. You know it when you see it after so many years of doing this, one would hope. Alan, shifting gears a bit, the Business Roundtable, Jamie Dimon, Larry Fink at BlackRock, we talk about purpose and profit, and they're being more and more seen as inextricably linked, looking at more than just the shareholder when looking at stakeholders. How do you factor that in, if at all, in your investment choices? It's clearly here to stay in my mind, but that doesn't mean it's for everybody. And I wonder how much credence you give to this.
Well, let me give you, I've given you long answers. Let me give you a kind of broader answer. When we started Primetime, we honestly thought we're profit motive. I don't want to mistake.
Yep.
On the other hand, we really sincerely felt why we wanted to become thought leaders, that there had to be more thought and focus on the aging generation, and that there wasn't enough attention to the fact that we have a lot of people who are getting older and they need services, and they should forget this ageist mental attitude. I mean, we've gotten rid of classism, we got in feminism. Now let's get rid of ageism and realize that there's an enormous amount of talent around. So I would say we had a social motivation in the back of our mind. Secondly, my former partner at Apax, Sir Ronald Cohen, is probably the leading person in the world today in impact investing. He's chairman of the G70 activity, and so I've become very exposed to what he's trying to accomplish and have been supportive of that. And Apax is now about to set up its first impact investing fund. Plus, that my son, I think all three of my sons, my son Jonathan has just formed a firm called Athletes Unlimited with Jonathan Soros, George Soros' son, who financed it. And they are really a social motivated impact fund where they have set up a concept to support professional women athletes in various sports, and to not build teams, but to build up stars, individual stars. It's called Athletes Unlimited. And it's a mission-driven company that has capped its return for the investors, which is very unusual. It's a B corporation, which is unusual, and it's brought in investors who are socially motivated and not just out solely for profit. It's made the women shareholders. The women are on the board. It is a company formed with a mission. So between Jonathan's activity, between Ronald Cohen's activity, between Apax's activity, my own activity, I have a fair amount of involvement in what's going on, and I think it's the wave of the future. And all young people coming out of college, I mean, they only want to do green. They only want to do things that are going to help society. So there's a tidal wave.
Yeah, you're a believer, I think, which is great. Last question for you, my friend. I love in the chapter in the book you're talking about, you did try to go to Woodstock. The car broke down. You had to be towed back with, I think, Betty, your first wife. I don't know if you were married then, but it was 1960.
No. It was with Susan. My
Susan, right.
who passed away. It was 1969. and we got married in 70. So we were dating in 69.
And
I
she
was
was
divorced.
once at dinner when she was further along in her Alzheimer's, but she was a lovely woman. So I have fun visions of you two on the West Side Highway going up to Woodstock and then having to turn around. But I somehow feel like this trip to Burning Man for you is a variation on that theme. And my question to you is not music one way to get our nation together again? When you think about how different folks from different walks of life will come together for a Burning Man or for a Woodstock, there's so much more we have in common, I think, than not. And I wonder if you share that view or not. I'd be happy to hear it either way.
You know, Toby, that is a very original thought. I have never heard anyone say it, but I think quickly, and as you say it, it really makes sense. I mean, when you think about when you go to a concert, Coachella or jazz festival, or there are people coming together from different walks of life. Yep. Burning Man in particular is no money, is exchange, no anything. You are gifting. You are nobody. But even in a concert world, the richest person in the world could be sitting next to the poorest person in the world. So it is a equalizer, and everybody shares an interest in music equally. So it's an interesting thought you're bringing up. Maybe we should have a lot more music concerts to bring people together instead of.
I have to give a shout out to your wonderful son, Mark, and his wife, Martha, a radical Dolphins fan. He, sports is the other one I come to. I do a lot of fundraisers as you do. I work with candidates. And my question these days is always, how are you going to bridge this nation back together, whoever wins, right? Like that's where we need to be going. So I think sports, music are ways to do it. But I'm really excited to hear about your trip to Burning Man. I hope you'll come back afterwards and share some of your tales. And I will also share my tips to you offline.
Well, thank you. And I hope all your listeners or watchers buy the book, No Red Lights. And, I look forward to getting comments.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, again, today we've had on the Caring Economy, Alan Patricof, the pioneer of venture capital, as well as the author of the new wonderful memoir, No Red Lights. You can find it on Amazon. Alan, did you do a recorded version of the book?
It's on Audible as well.
As well, good. Yeah. So ladies, gentlemen, read the book, and Alan, please come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.